Monti Group Leadership Podcast.
Well, welcome to the next episode of the Monti Group Leadership Podcast, hosted by Abe Monti and myself, Walter Cunningham. Abe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
That's awesome. I see you have two guests studio with you today.
Two esteemed guests with us today.
Yeah, the famous or infamous? Which one is it?
Something like that. One of them's famous, one of them's infamous. We'll find out which is which.
You decide.
You decide.
Yeah, we'll wait till the end of the podcast and make that determination. Now, thanks to both Ben Monti and Tim Monti for joining us. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you a part of the show today. So just as a reminder, everybody, today's episode, we're kind of taking the second half of the first chapter in our Monti Group Leaders Guide called Our Journey. So last episode was Ruth Monti Wilkie helping us with kind of the historian view. Today, we want to really take the kind of the purpose. So organizations that stay together, specifically family businesses that last for multiple generations, they come together with a purpose in mind. And we talked a little bit about that in our last episode. So today, just as a quick recap, the purpose for the Monti Group companies, all the business units, the purpose statements is literally dressing the earth to the glory of God. And so if you've read the article, which we're not going to do deep dive here, we kind of unpack both parts of that statement. And there's a really cool story, Ted told. So Tim, this is your father telling this story kind of over and over. Yes. Reward and inheritance. So that's a story that most people have probably heard if they're connected to the family, but leaders inside these businesses, they may be reading that story for the first time. What we want to do today is give each of you an opportunity as a representation from both the Ernie and the Ted branch of the Manthei family to kind of take a principle that makes this practical. So we want to take this out of the stars and out of the sky and sort of boots on the ground, make it practical. So Ben, I'm going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about, you wrote a book, and in that book, you talked about something called the life principle. So I'm going to guess most leaders inside most of the Monti Group businesses may not be familiar with that. So give me a quick introduction. What is the life principle? I think that's an acronym, but unpack that for me. And then tell me a quick story that makes it fun. Make it practical for me.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Well, I'm turning 70 tomorrow. So I'm in the fifth quarter, and seldom do we get a chance to look back across generations to see what happened. But we've learned some key things from our immigrant grandparents that were all about, they brought faith and they brought a work ethic. We learned from them. Then they transitioned to Gen 1, basically Ted and Ernie. They really had three things that they exemplified in their careers that transitioned into our generation, Gen 2. The first was teamwork. They were a team, a visionary and a get it done guy. And they taught us teamwork. And they taught us that number one is usually far too small of a number to accomplish really significant things. And Mother Teresa said it the best. She said, "You can do some things I cannot do. I can do some things you cannot do. Together, we can do some great things." That's teamwork.
Yeah.
Second thing they taught us was work ethic based on biblical values. And they taught us the world is hungry for people that just do what they say they're going to do. That's something. Third thing they taught us was having a purpose bigger than themselves. They were big on tithing. They read about it in the Bible. They applied it. And if you remember World War II, if you remember at the end when we won the war, General MacArthur went out on USS Missouri and they signed the peace treaty. And he said at that time, "Please, America, send missionaries. Let's help rebuild Japan because we devastated several of their cities." And Ted and Ernie were the first ones to accept that challenge. And they funded the Lutheran Hour, broadcasting the gospel message back into Japan. And so they gave us an example that was just awesome. Then mid-career, I learned tithing when I was 10 years old. That's a whole nother story we could go into. That's kind of funny. But mid-career, a group of us, Gen 2, went to a seminar, Breckenridge, Colorado. It was called Quest for Significance. I didn't even know what it meant other than I was sitting in my hot tub over a summer thinking about, I'm halfway through a good first half. What about the second half? Do I just want to double everything? And so a friend of mine from Dallas, Texas, Arch Bonham, called and said, hey, come to this seminar. So 4 of us went out with him. And the speaker got up, and the first thing he said is, you guys are all business guys, about 100 business guys there. He said, you're thinking way too small. It made me mad. We had just done our 2-year plan, our 5-year plan. He didn't know us from Adam. It made me mad. He went on to say, guys, we want you to think, you're used to doing business plans. We want you to think big enough that it'll impact someone 1,000 years from now. And I said, whoa. No, our 2-year plan didn't go 1,000 years out. And of course, you know the answer. He said, if you can impact where someone will spend eternity, you've impacted them 1,000 years and beyond. And so they said, guys, we don't want your money. We want your life. And life is an acronym. L is for our labor. I is for our influence. I didn't even know I had influence other than I made my little sister Ruth run away when I was 12 and she was 10. I made her run away from home twice one summer. My mom rescued her before she got to the field. But I knew I had influence, but obviously I was using it wrong. I needed to learn more how to use influence. F is for your finances. I knew what that meant. And E is for your expertise. And so they challenged us to make a 4-year commitment and come and use our labor, our influence, our finance expertise. Let's go change this world. To this day, I get goosebumps up my backbone when I think about it. We made a 4-year commitment, and that's when we started traveling overseas in a major way, giving back, teaming up. It gave purpose for our business. I mean, you could only live in one house at a time. You can only drive one car. If it's all about me, it's kind of dead-ended. So we got on this team, giving back, helping fulfill the Great Commission. They called it History Handful, by the way. Throughout history, there's been only a handful of people that really focus on changing the world. There's about 30% of the world that just survives, and about 60% that are indifferent. They're happy with their lives, just what they're doing. And about 5 to 10% are impacting the world, either for positive, like Billy Graham, or negative, like Hussam. What's his name?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, that guy. Anyway, so they challenged us to impact. And so that's when Ready Rock was actually launched, because we made that commitment. And I remember we prayed, 4 of us prayed, God, there's such a big job to reach the world. Either help us make more money so we can help give, or help us figure out how to use our influence so we can encourage others to join the team. That very winter, Jim came home and sketched on a little napkin the idea of the first retaining wall block out of return waste concrete. He built the first wall at Bay Harbor, big development next to us. And then Jim got excited about the next project. Mark and I looked at it. I said, Mark, that's a $10 million idea. I'll take that, run with it. It was an answer to that prayer at Breckenridge, Colorado. And that company took off like wild. The first 8 of 10 years, it became the leading profit center of all of our individual businesses. It was a God thing. We shouldn't have got that idea and taken it to the world. It grew to 48 states, and now it's over 40 countries. And very, very successful company. And it's come full circle, because I went and sat at one of our meetings where we call all our licensees together. And at the end, we pitched all our new products for the next year. And I symbolically took my hat off and I said, to you owners, Ready Rock's been really good for many of you. It's been really good for us. What if we were to team up and go down and research? I know this little ministry in Latin America. What if we went down to see if there's anything we could do to help? Team up together.
Yep.
4 of them that night took me up on the challenge, and we flew down, and there's several of them still giving today, involved in giving back. That's influence. And on one hand, we say we worked very hard at it. On the other hand, we say, we were totally blessed in spite of ourselves, because we don't do it all right. There's only my one guarantee, and I'm going to probably close.
Oh, there's a guarantee. I love it. Make me a guarantee.
I tell people when they work with Ready Rock, when I was president of Ready Rock, I said, all I can guarantee you is that if you work with us long enough, we will screw up. That's my guarantee to you. All I ask is give us time to make it right. And they laugh, and it disarms them.
Yeah.
And we've had times where we have screwed up, and we've worked through it, and we've come out much stronger together with them on the other end. But there's bumps in the road you have to learn to work through. It's like a marriage. When you're a licensee or a licensee, it's like a marriage. You can't, if you buy a John Deere loader and you get cross with them, you just go buy a Caterpillar loader. We couldn't do that. We had to work it out. And it's been amazing. And
that's Ben,
our best days are yet ahead of us on that. As successful it's been, our best days are yet ahead.
I love that principle, Ben. Just thinking about no matter what level of leadership I'm at in one of the Monti Group businesses, there's going to be tension. There's going to be things that mistakes we make. I mean, that's just truth in life. Sometimes we're more willing to admit the mistakes we've made, but I think it's an encouragement. So if you're listening to this and you're a leader in one of these companies, the only guarantee Ben has made is that we're going to mess it up. And I think that gives us permission to realize we are going to make mistakes. What we do next now matters, because that was the opportunity you asked in that moment, which is really important. You broke the ice, you got them laughing. So we're going to make some mistakes. What we do next really matters. And I think, Abe, you and I have been talking a lot about as we're teaching and training leaders, how do we help them recover, and not just recover and say, I did that wrong, but with humility say, okay, can we learn together? How could I do that differently? And that's a beautiful thing. Appreciate that principle, Ben. Tim, maybe you could take a different direction from a purpose perspective. So Ben laid the groundwork. He said, kind of an idea guy, and then somebody that's to get it done. So I know you've got a principle. You and I have sat on your back patio. I think we had breakfast one morning, and you told me a story about cats, ops, and orgs. So maybe unpack that for the listeners here today. What is a cat? What's an op? And what's an org? And how does that work in terms of kind of the entrepreneurial spirit that is deeply interwoven into every Monti I've ever met?
Yeah. Well, let me just think about that a little bit.
Sure.
I would say that it's really important to learn who you are, what your gift mix is, if you're going to do something in this world, and then if you're going to lead, who other people are. And so there's lots of different ways to break people up into different categories. And I think it's really helpful sometimes to see more clearly if you can do that. So one way to look at people is there are these three different kinds of people in the world. There's catalyzers, people who they're visionaries. They see things, they kind of start to put things together, and they make messes a lot of times. But they get things started. And then there are organizers. They're people who can take an idea that a cat has started and really start to put wheels on it and make it function, make it work good. Then lastly, there are operators, and the world is mostly made up of operators. So I would call them ops. And we even have, COOs, So people that get up in the morning and make sure that things run well. So the world needs all three of these kinds of people. Very important to have cats, and new things probably wouldn't, ever start unless there were cats. And some people are kind of like pure cat org op, or some people are a combination. They have a combination of this inside of them. So, but I think my dad, Ted, was pretty much pure cat. He told me one time, he said, Timmy, never ever hire anybody. It just doesn't work. So he just didn't, he didn't understand about the org or the especially the op. But it turns out he had a brother that was an org, and his brother Ernie, his little brother, when his brother followed him around, he ended up putting wheels on some of the things that my dad started. Yeah. You can look through the whole Manthei Gen 1, how they got things going, and it was my dad that saw it, and then it was Ernie that put wheels on it. But turns out they married into a family of ops, so they hired a lot of their in-laws to run the companies that they started. The thing is, cats usually lose what they start unless they have an organization behind them. Mm-hmm. And the world is pretty much run by ops. And it's important to appreciate, it's very, very hard to appreciate a cat if you're an op. You just don't really need them, really, because you get up and you want to make things work, and cats make messes. And so what you're looking for is stability. Mm-hmm. If you're going to run an organization, you got to run it. And cats come in and they change things. So they have vision to do different things. So that's kind of in the nutshell. There's these three kinds of people. You can divide people up lots of different ways, but this is helpful if you want to be effective. I think there are effective people at running an organization, and there are really ineffective people. And one of the things is, if you're really just self-centered, you think everybody should be like you, and you don't really appreciate people that are really different from you. That makes it hard. Makes it hard unless you learn how to appreciate the other kind of guy.
So that's so true. Principle that you said there, Tim, that Ted had a partner who was different, and then you alluded to he learned to trust his partner who was different, and Ernie did the same thing. And that's just like, as a leader, I think being in this family, watching you guys work together, what made it work for you guys is that you learned that the other guy was different, and that was a good thing. You started, obviously that's hard to say, because we all look at the world through our own perspective and think, why doesn't everybody act just like me? Yeah. I'm the one that has it right. Everybody else has got it a little bit wrong. But the truth is, like you said, if you're a cat, or however there's 100 different companies that divide people up in things.
Different ways.
You're different ways you look at the world.
Yeah.
And the gold comes when you learn that the other gifts are actually, God put them there for a reason. And it's not to try to work over the top of them. It's to try to have that group complement whoever's different, complement you, because they're different.
Yeah, I think, that takes a lot of maturity. And I think each generation is probably, there was a lot of dysfunction in Gen 1. There was a lot of dysfunction. They did not really appreciate each other like they should have. And I think Gen 2 probably was a little bit better at appreciating each other. Still, a lot of dysfunction in Gen 2. I think Gen 3 probably has a lot more information, and probably they have more inclination to really work together and help the other understand the other guy's gift mix.
So let me add in here. One of the ways I think in our generation that we showed appreciation for each other, we decided to all take the same salary, no matter whether you were the president, vice president, or whatever. And then we weren't vying for the top position. We were vying to make our gift mix fit the organization. And it really worked for us. The other thing I wanted to say about the cat organopt is they say about to every cat, a visionary, there might be 10 orgs or organizers. And to every organizer, there might be 10 operators that make it work. Now, I don't know if that's true, but they also say 90% of statistics are made up on the spot. And that may be one of them.
Yes.
You decide.
Yeah, I would think that would be true. I would think there's a lot fewer cats than that, or how you just described them. The world is mainly operators because that's the way that's really necessary. You don't need too many cats. If you have too many, you're in trouble, I think.
Not many with those.
But I think it's really important to, if you're going to work with other people, you have to really learn. There has to be a humility involved, because you really want people to do it your way. I mean, and Gen 2 had more of an issue there than I think Gen 3 is having. Gen 3 is growing and getting more good information coming in and trying to be learners. I think that here's the other thing that I would like to just say. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's learners and there's the learned. Most people get learned when they're really young. Usually when they're in their 20s, they get learned. And they're finished learning. So you look at a lot of people that are in their 60s or 70s, and you think, oh, wow, what a fountain of wisdom they might be. But they probably got learned when they were in their 20s. And that's the kind of wisdom you get from a lot of people. But there's a few people that are learners, and they can learn, and they have this attitude of wanting to learn from each other, learn from other people, learn from their experiences. It's hard to do.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I'm just reflecting on what I've seen, Tim, to your point, in Gen 2, it was learning to build on that kind of appreciation. You both said it, both Ben and Tim. What I've observed in Gen 3, and Abe, you can comment on this if you'd like, but is not just a sense of appreciation, but trying to figure out how to co-labor. Collaboration is like the next muscle that I see the family leaders really working on, is how do we collaborate? Mm-hmm. And that requires an immense amount of trust to begin with. And it also requires kind of leaning into healthy conflict. Mm-hmm. And Abe, maybe just comment from your vantage point. We've been talking about it at kind of the highest levels, but if I'm a leader anywhere in this organization, how important is trust, and how important is kind of this leaning into healthy conflict to really start to appreciate kind of the differences in our gifts?
Yeah, I've even seen this in the last 2 or 3 years, Walter. This has been something that I'm seeing in myself and in our family. When you believe that and this has happened for me too, when I believe my gifts are the best gifts, the way I look at the world is the best way, or I have the truth, I understand the investment plan or whatever that is, and then someone pushes on me a little bit, they've got a different view of things, what the natural tendency is to go hide from them. Don't give them any more information than I need to. And then go do my own thing that's over here in the corner where they're not watching over me.
Yeah.
Now, what I gain in that is I don't have to deal with conflict. What I lose is their wisdom and their input. And what I have learned, and this has just been in the last couple of years and really in the last probably 6 months, I'm really starting to get fresh revelation of this idea that instead of poking at it, when in a family business, it's very easy to say, I know Ben's weaknesses. I know Tim's weaknesses. I know all the family members' weaknesses because I've worked with them. Therefore, I can't trust them because I know that they have this belief that's wrong or this belief that's wrong or this area of weakness. Ben's not good at this, so therefore I just can't trust him. But if I instead said, what are the things Ben can do well and what are the things I can do well? And can we collaborate together and work together and create a whole person between the two of us? man, that takes a lot of maturity on my part because I have to admit I don't have it all together. It also takes a lot of time because I have to spend the time to really understand Ben's perspective. But wow, at the end, we can end up, like you said, collaborating. Walter used that word collaborating. We can collaborate and we can create something really cool. I saw this with Ben, you and Mark and my dad, Jim, to an extent, a lot through growing up because you guys were very different people and you could lean on each other at times, whether you recognized you were doing it or not, collaborating through things. And it was really cool watching. Now, I'm not here to say that you guys had it all together and you can pick the ways you did, but it was really cool to see.
It was interesting. I had I'm not going to say names, but I had a Gen 2 member tell me recently, hey, it's almost not fair. Mark, Jim, and Ben always agree and they get things done. And they said, we can't agree. So it's unfair what you guys do. Well, Jim and I used to fight like cats and dogs.
I've seen it.
But late in our careers, I've learned two things. One is I've tried to go out of my way to support Jim in his ideas because he is a visionary. And we would not have had Ready Rock without Jim coming up with the first form and the first wall. And so I always give him the credit. He was on to the next thing then, but I had a lot of organization and helped get it up and running. But I go out of my way to find what Jim is doing and support him because the guy's a genius. He gets a lot of stuff started. And if you can come alongside and help him put wheels on it, it really works.
I think, as we kind of begin to land this plane, like we started this as around our purpose, right? And Ben, you gave us a beautiful illustration of, how do I impact? I mean, you were challenged with this in Colorado. How do I impact not just the next 2 or 5 years, but 1,000 years into the future? I mean, you just have to think differently. And Tim, I loved the wisdom you brought, and that started with the question, like, before I can really understand somebody else, I have to actually understand me. Who am I, and what are the gifts that I have? And then looking for complementary spaces to bring those gifts or the talents, maybe in kind of business vernacular, the talents that I have, the things that come easier naturally to me. And then both of you underline and Abe, you reinforced, like, I have to have the humility to say I don't have all the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to kind of land this plane by encouraging, even if you don't share in the same faith as the Manthei family, they've laid out in this chapter, their purpose is to address the earth to the glory of God. So all things are done to the glory of God from the Manthei family perspective. As a leader in this business, I'm going to put my hand to what's in front of me. That's the team that I'm directly given the opportunity to steward or support or lead. And I want to see them become the best version of themselves. That's the practical way of me taking these principles. What is my life? My labor, my influence, right? My finances. Maybe it's not so much my finances, but the time that I'm given to invest while I'm inside this business leading. That's a beautiful thing, to raise people up to their maximum potential, their God-given potential. What a gift. And then how do I use my expertise to help somebody else? But Tim, you're spot on. Like, I've got to be able to understand who I am and understand that I don't have it all. I don't have all the answers. And I think that's where this really matters when we're thinking 100 years from now in the Manthei family business.
So, Walter, I put that in a book. I had an epiphany in the hot tub one day that this book is how we took that principle, several family members in here, and what it actually looked like when it was applied. And my sister writes it as though I was a James Bond 007, and I'm not. I say, no, I'm a Forrest Gump. I stumble and bumble along. If anything, when I had an opportunity, I said yes and went. The rest is a God thing. It's just a God thing what happened. But everybody's life will look different. They have different opportunities.
Yeah.
But the principle is transferable.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing.
Really cool.
Yeah, I think to all the leaders that are listening to this, thank you guys. Number one, it's a blessing to have both Tim and Ben join Abe and I in this. So thank you guys for taking some time out of your afternoon. You're in the fourth, or I think Ben, you said the fifth quarter. The beautiful thing about Gen 2 is they're really invested in mentoring the next generation, not just of Manthei's, but mentoring the next generation of leaders. So if you've not met these guys, I'd highly encourage, if you have the chance to meet them, they'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. That might mean you have to buy the cup of coffee. I don't know. But they'd love to share their wisdom with you. They've done that just very, very freely and very graciously with me. But if you're listening to this, I just encourage you. There are plenty of resources, Ben. The title of your book, In His Majesty's Service. You co-authored that with your sister, I think. And yeah, I just want to encourage leaders. You don't have to get it all right the first time. You have to have the humility to say, I missed it, and could I have the grace to try it again and get back in the game? I think that's part of what we're saying in this chapter. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for taking time in this episode. Abe, good to see you again. And until next time, we'll be picking up the next couple of chapters in our Leader's Guide and helping put them practically into wisdom for you. So thanks for joining us on this episode today.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Copyright 2025, the Monti Group, Petoskey, Michigan.